Thousands of rounds of ammunition are kept within its wings. Ground tests are conducted on the guns. In 1943, German pilots laughed at the American P-47 Thunderbolt upon seeing it for the first time. They were impressed by the powerful engine but regarded it as a lumbering beast. It seemed too heavy, slow, and clumsy to be a real threat. They derided it as a 7-ton milk bottle, confident that their sleek Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs would easily swat it from the skies. However, their laughter soon faded, for hidden beneath its bulky exterior was a formidable fighter. Equipped with 8.50 caliber machine guns, a fearsome dive speed, and thick armor that could absorb cannon fire, the Thunderbolt transformed the air war. The story of the Thunderbolt begins in the tense days of 1940. At that time, America had not yet entered the war. However, its engineers were already strategizing what kind of aircraft would be necessary for victory. At Republic Aviation, lead engineer Alexander Cartville faced a daunting task. U.S. commanders required a high-altitude fighter capable of escorting bombers deep into enemy territory while being tough enough to battle the best of the Luftwaffe. Cartville's solution was not a sleek design, it was a brutal machine. He built the fighter around one of the largest engines ever used in a single-seat aircraft, the 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. From the outset, the P-47 was never meant to be graceful. Instead, it was engineered to be unstoppable. When the prototype debuted in 1941, pilots were astonished by its considerable size. Fully loaded, it weighed close to 17,000 pounds, overshadowing both the Spitfire and the Messerschmitt Bf 109. Its wide fuselage resembled a steel milk jug, and it earned the nickname Jug. Initially a term of derision, this name would soon be uttered with respect and admiration. The Thunderbolt held a unique advantage: 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, 4 mounted in each wing. Each gun could unleash 13 rounds per second. Combined, they could fire over 100 rounds each second, sending nearly 13 pounds of lead into the air at once. In comparison, many German fighters were equipped with dual 20mm cannons and 2 rifle-caliber machine guns. The Jug enveloped its foes in an inferno of firepower. But firepower was just one aspect. The P-47 resembled a tank in the sky. Its air-cooled radial engine could endure damage that would cause a liquid-cooled Merlin or Daimler-Benz engine to ignite. Its wings and fuselage were reinforced to withstand immense stress, and the cockpit was shielded by armor plates, giving pilots a fighting chance against flak and cannon fire. Pilots would later swear that the Jug could take more damage than any other fighter in the war and still manage to return home. At first, however, this beast faced issues. Its massive size resulted in high fuel consumption, and early models struggled with range. Without drop tanks, it barely managed to escort bombers beyond the French coast. Climbing was sluggish in comparison to agile German fighters, leading to pilot complaints about its weight and dimensions. Yet, beneath these grievances lay a crucial truth. The Thunderbolt was not designed for intricate maneuvers. Its purpose was to dive powerfully from the heavens, strike with brute force, and endure what no other fighter could withstand. A new weapon for a new kind of conflict, the world was unaware that Cartville's creation would soon turn Europe's skies into a battleground. While Germans laughed and Americans doubted, the Jug would eventually reveal itself, not as a toy or a blunder, but as one of World War II's deadliest predators. Upon its entrance into European skies in 1943, German pilots reacted with laughter. To the Luftwaffe, it appeared to be an error, a bulky brute masquerading as a fighter. Compared to the sleek, agile lines of the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Focke-Wulf 190, the Jug looked bloated and sluggish, seemingly ill-equipped for dogfights. Luftwaffe intelligence mocked it as the 7-ton milk bottle, perpetuating the idea that it was just another display of American excess, too big, too heavy, and too uncoordinated. For pilots like Adolf Galland, one of Germany's top aces, the key to victory was clear. The Luftwaffe had perfected air combat with lightweight, nimble fighters. German pilots thrived on precision, discipline, and the capacity to outmaneuver an adversary. To them, the Thunderbolt appeared laughable, with jokes suggesting it was more likely to fall from the sky than win in a dogfight. But arrogance hid a lethal truth. While German pilots laughed, American pilots quickly adapted. They recognized that trying to outturn a Bf 109 was a fatal mistake, yet they didn't need to. The Jug could dive unparalleled depths compared to other fighters in the war. In a steep dive, its significant mass converted to raw speed. Many German aces who attempted to follow found their flight controls locking up, and their wings trembled as they neared the limits of their aircraft. The Thunderbolt merely pressed on, pulling out at speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour, its pilot unscathed and ready for more. The Germans also underestimated the Jug's durability. Initially, Luftwaffe pilots reported shock when, despite their cannon fire, the American fighter staggered, smoked, and yet kept flying. One ace likened it to shooting at a miniature flying fortress, while another called it a beast that refused to perish. The mirth that once filled Luftwaffe briefings gradually turned to exasperated growls. The most alarming realization occurred when those 8.50 caliber machine guns opened fire. German pilots who had dismissed the Thunderbolt as an easily targeted aircraft found themselves shredded midair. A single burst could devastate wings, engines, or cockpits, leaving no chance for escape. Luftwaffe veterans later acknowledged that underestimating the Jug was a fatal error. Their hubris concealed the fact that America had created not a toy, but a monster. By the time laughter turned into fear, it was too late. The P-47 was no jest. It became a storm of steel that was just starting to showcase Germany what true firepower entailed. The P-47's genuine reputation wasn't created in design discussions or through mocking chatter. It was forged in the heat of battle over Europe in 1943. By then, the skies had turned into a merciless chessboard. American bombers, including the B-17 and B-24, were striking deep within occupied Europe, with the Luftwaffe determined to bring them down. Initially, German aces felt confident. They had ravaged early bomber formations, believing no escort could withstand their might. And then, the Jug arrived. The Thunderbolt's early missions were bumpy. Due to limited range, it could only partially escort bombers, allowing Luftwaffe pilots to strike once the Jugs turned back. Losses mounted, leading some American crews to question the new fighter's effectiveness. However, when the Thunderbolt engaged, the outcomes were astonishing. In one of its first dogfights, a German pilot dove on what he considered an easy target. He opened fire, riddling the P-47 with cannon rounds, only to watch in disbelief as it continued flying. Moments later, the Jug changed course, its 8 Brownings roaring in unison. The German fighter disintegrated in midair. Pilots rapidly grasped the Thunderbolt's strengths. It wasn't a graceful flyer like the Spitfire or a nimble duelist like the Mustang. Instead, it functioned as a powerful hammer. American flyers utilized the Jug's weight to dive from high altitudes with frightening speed, unleashing furiously destructive bursts before climbing back to safety. German pilots who attempted to follow often lost control in their lighter aircraft, crashing into the ground or compromising their wings. One Luftwaffe ace admitted, "You could not follow a Jug in a dive. It would take you to your death." The Jug excelled in roles that would cement its legacy: ground attack. Armed with bombs and rockets in addition to its .50 cals, the Thunderbolt tore through German convoys, trains, and tanks. German troops learned to recoil at the sound of its engine, knowing that in mere seconds, their columns could be obliterated in an eruption of lead and fire. The once ridiculed milk bottle evolved into a predator hunting both in the sky and on the ground. By late 1943, the results were irrefutable. Thunderbolts amassed impressive kill counts, with pilots returning in planes battered by flak and cannon fire, yet still intact. Word spread throughout Luftwaffe ranks that the Jug was not an easy target. It became a machine that laughed off damage, struck with a hammer's force, and remained defiant amid adversity. The tone of German briefings shifted. What had once been referred to as a clumsy giant became whispered about as a nightmare. The P-47 had drawn blood and grew more voracious with each mission. By 1944, German pilots no longer laughed when spotting a P-47 Thunderbolt. Instead, they feared it. Once the Jug's pilots squeezed the triggers, 8 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns roared to life, unleashing an unprecedented wave of destruction unmatched by any other single-engine fighter in the war. With 4 guns per wing, each firing 13 rounds per second, over 100 high-velocity bullets per second pierced the air. Against lightly armored German fighters, this was sheer overkill. For ground targets, it signified annihilation. German pilots who had previously ridiculed the Thunderbolt quickly recognized how little margin for error they possessed. A short burst could be all it took, sometimes just a single second, to obliterate a Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf. The .50 cals didn't just create holes, they shredded fuselages, tore off wings, ignited fuel tanks, and incapacitated engines. Pilots who had experienced numerous dogfights against Spitfires or Mustangs submitted that the Jug's firepower was an entirely different level. One Luftwaffe veteran somberly recalled, "It felt like being hit by a flying wall of lead, but the killing power extended beyond the skies." By mid-1944, the Thunderbolt morphed into a fearsome presence on the battlefield. Armed with bombs and rockets, it transformed into an aerial artillery piece. German armor columns learned that even the sturdiest panzer was vulnerable when the Jug swept low. A single rocket could blast the turret off a Tiger tank, while strafing runs reduced trucks, supply trains, and convoys to flaming wreckage. The distinctive sound of .50 cals ripping through the air became a psychological weapon. German infantrymen froze in terror whenever they heard the thunder of the Jug overhead, acutely aware that devastation was mere seconds away. For the American pilots, the Thunderbolt represented more than a weapon; it symbolized protection. Pilots placed their trust in the Jug to return them home, often recounting tales of P-47s arriving back with shredded wings, sputtering engines, or even missing tails, yet still managing to stay airborne. The Jug could endure damage that would doom nearly any other aircraft. This legendary toughness emboldened its pilots, allowing them to fly aggressively, prolonging their presence in the fight, and executing attacks that would have been suicidal in any other plane. The impact on German morale was profound. Where Luftwaffe pilots once brimming with confidence in their machines now faced an adversary that combined immense firepower with near invulnerability. For ground troops, the Jug became synonymous with impending death from above. What had started as laughter morphed into fear, and what was once mockery transformed into silent dread. The Thunderbolt had firmly established its reputation. It was not merely a fighter, it was a storm of steel. And whenever its guns roared, even the bravest Luftwaffe aces paid close attention. June 6, 1944, marked the beginning of the largest invasion in human history. As Allied forces stormed the Normandy beaches, countless aircraft filled the skies. Among them were P-47 Thunderbolts, flying tanks with a reputation for ferocity. That morning, the German defenders who had previously scorned the Jug as an unwieldy brute discovered just how devastating it could be when unleashed at full force. The Thunderbolt was everywhere. Before dawn, Jugs roared across northern France, strafing railways, disrupting communications, and obliterating convoys carrying reinforcements to the coast. Once daylight broke, they circled the beaches, ready to pounce on any German unit daring to move in the open. For Wehrmacht soldiers, it became a waking nightmare. Imagine crouching in a hedgerow, hearing the distant rumble of engines, and then spotting the massive P-47 diving directly toward you. Within moments, .50 cals unleashed a torrent of fire, obliterating trucks, artillery, and men. Survivors spoke of the psychological agony knowing that, regardless of where they fled, the Jug would hunt them down. For German pilots, conditions were equally dire. The Luftwaffe was stretched thin, its numbers decimated by years of attrition. As they attempted to confront Allied aircraft over Normandy, they found themselves outnumbered and outmatched. P-47s on escort and patrol duty struck with brutal efficiency. Even elite German aces, who dismissed the Jug as a flying milk bottle, acknowledged their grim reality. Against swarms of Thunderbolts, their Bf-109s and Fw-190s stood little chance. What rendered the Jug especially perilous in Normandy wasn't solely its firepower but its versatility. In one instant, it would be engaging a panzer column; the next, it would confront fighters above the beaches, followed by bombarding artillery hidden miles inland. German commanders, already beleaguered by the invasion's chaos, recognized they could not risk moving troops or supplies in daylight without subjecting themselves to annihilation. The Jug transformed into a weapon of paralysis, immobilizing German forces while the Allies advanced. D-Day marked a transformative moment. From then on, the Luftwaffe could never reclaim control of the skies over Western Europe. Thunderbolts, once regarded as an awkward miscalculation, became essential. An airborne hammer smashing German resistance from above. For German ground troops, every shadow overhead incited dread. For German pilots, every time they ascended into the air, it felt like a one-way trip. Normandy confirmed beyond doubt, the Jug was no casual threat. It evolved into a weapon that tilted the balance. After Normandy, the conflict in Western Europe shifted into a relentless pursuit. German troops retreated eastward, scrambling to regroup while the Allies pushed forward. Above them prowled the P-47 Thunderbolt, resembling a predator on the hunt. By late 1944, the Jug had transformed from merely a fighter into one of history's most feared ground attack aircraft. The strategy was straightforward yet devastating: cripple the German war machine by destroying everything in motion. P-47s, equipped with bombs, rockets, and relentless .50 calories machine guns, scoured roads, railways, and bridges. Every convoy turned into a target, while trains became death sentences. German soldiers learned quickly that daytime movement was tantamount to suicide. When a column of panzers or trucks was spotted, the jugs would descend in waves, unleashing devastation so intense that survivors claimed the ground itself exploded. One German officer later remarked, "We feared the Jabos more than anything else. You could not escape them. They were everywhere." Jabo, short for Jagdbomber, was the moniker German soldiers gave to the Thunderbolt and other Allied fighter bombers, with the P-47 standing out for its sheer ferocity. Its rockets could demolish even the heaviest Tiger tanks, while its .50 cals efficiently reduced infantry to shadows on the roads. Reports surfaced of entire columns annihilated within moments, leaving behind black smoke and ruins marking the Jug's path. For American pilots, this is where the Jug truly earned their love. They called it a flying fortress for its ability to endure anti-aircraft fire and still return them safely. Many shared stories of arriving back at base with torn wings, fist-sized holes punctured through the fuselage, and engines sputtering smoke, yet the Jug held together. The aircraft instilled courage in its pilots, who, in turn, gave no quarter to the Luftwaffe or Wehrmacht. By autumn 1944, German soldiers dreaded not only Allied armor but also the skies above them. Every supply run, every retreat, and every attempt to regroup carried the risk of sudden destruction. The Jug redefined ground warfare as an ongoing nightmare. Even when Luftwaffe fighters intervened, they frequently found themselves overwhelmed, unable to stop the Thunderbolts from wreaking havoc below. The route into Germany became littered with wreckage, destroyed trains, burning trucks, and tank carcasses scattered across the countryside. This path was not solely carved by Allied forces, but also by the relentless hunting of the Thunderbolts. What the Germans had once ridiculed as too cumbersome and overly American transformed into the very weapon that stifled their war efforts. The Jug became not only feared but intensely loathed. Whispers of terror filled conversations among those who lived under its looming shadow. In December 1944, Hitler made one last desperate attempt to turn the tide during the Battle of the Bulge. Using the cover of winter snow and fog, German tanks and infantry surged through the Ardennes, targeting thin American lines. For a fleeting moment, it appeared that the Wehrmacht had regained its former might. The Allies staggered, their supply lines fractured, and their positions crumbling. However, one crucial factor remained unaccounted for. The weather would not remain favorable forever. Once the skies cleared, the P-47 Thunderbolt would descend with a vengeance. During the first week of the battle, dense clouds grounded much of the Allied Air Force. Encouraged, German troops moved their convoys openly, rolling their Tigers and Panthers through icy forests. But by December 23, the fog lifted, and chaos ensued. Squadrons of Thunderbolts roared overhead, swooping low along snow-laden roads. What ensued was a massacre. American pilots labeled it "turkey shoot weather," while German survivors referred to it as hell. Columns that had previously advanced with confidence found themselves trapped on roads strewn with burning wrecks. The Jug's rockets smashed heavy tanks like fragile eggshells, while its .50 cals annihilated trucks, fuel depots, and artillery positions. Bridges collapsed under relentless bombing runs, severing any chance of retreat. The Germans had committed their final reserves, their last opportunity for a decisive thrust, and the Thunderbolt tore it apart from above. For Luftwaffe pilots, the battle was excruciating. They rushed to protect their comrades on the ground, yet every ascent into the air meant facing Thunderbolts lying in wait at altitude. The Jug transformed into a hunter of hunters, and its pilots understood the stakes. If they successfully thwarted the German counteroffensive here, They will extinguish the Reich's last hopes. Chilling accounts emerged from pilots during the bulge. One described strafing a column until the road resembled a graveyard of metal. Another recounted seeing German soldiers flee their vehicles, only to be gunned down as the Jug's rounds ruptured the snow with fire. The psychological impact was total. Wehrmacht reports documented entire units refusing to take action by day, convinced the very sky was cursed. By January 1945, the bulge had collapsed, burying the German dream of splitting the Allies in two beneath a pile of burned-out tanks and shattered convoys. When historians later analyzed the turning point of the battle, they noted the role of the P-47 Thunderbolt as critical. The Jug had transformed aerial combat into an Allied advantage and successfully crippled Germany's last major offensive. From that moment forward, the Wehrmacht would not mount further counterattacks or bold thrusts. The road to Berlin was now unobstructed, and the Jug continued its relentless hunt. By 1945, the Luftwaffe was deteriorating, but the P-47 Thunderbolt showed no mercy. Thunderbolts swept through Germany's heartland, demolishing rail yards, convoys, and tank columns with bombs, rockets, and the relentless roar of .50 cals. German soldiers labeled them "Jabos" and admitted their greater fear of the Jug compared to artillery, as there was nowhere to seek refuge. In the air, desperate Bf-109s and Fw-190s fought hopeless battles for supremacy. The Jug's diving capacity and resilience provided it a decisive advantage, tearing through even the most experienced pilots. Luftwaffe veterans later confessed the Thunderbolt shattered their morale. What they once considered a clumsy giant morphed into an inescapable nightmare. By war's end, the Jug's thunder resounded throughout Germany, marking the collapse of the Reich.